Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17, U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips a balance in favor of fair use. Okay, guys, I'm going to continue part 2 of Brainwashing in the Rehabilitation Project Force, known as the RPF, the prison, and let's also pay close attention to the children's RPF, because everyone's acting like they don't know what it is. Ideational history of the RPF. 5 often overlapping activities of social control seem universal in all of the RPF information that is available from non-Scientology sources. These activities are 1. Forcible confinement. 2. Physical maltreatment through such things as hard exercise, physically demanding chores, poor diet, limited time for hygiene, and inadequate sleeping arrangements, etc. 3. Maltreatment through restrictions in verbal and written communication with others, degradation, very low pay, etc. 4. Intensive study of ideology. And 5. Forced confessions of past alleged sins. The goal of these activities is in the alignment of the RPF inmates, like children, with the ideology of Scientology as directed by its leaders. This alignment comes about after the program has eliminated people's abilities or desires to criticize policies or the leaders who oversee their implementation. Remarkably, a 1955 booklet that Hubbard himself also almost certainly wrote described psychopolitical techniques of subduing people and populations to totalitarian rule. And some of the techniques foreshadow the RPF policies that subsequently he approved for use against his own elite corps. If this is sounding Charlie, Igloo, Alpha to you, you're on the right track. Hubbard's Brainwashing and Psychopolitics Manual. The booklet was entitled Brainwashing, a synthesis of the Russian textbook on psychopolitics, and one version was published as a public service by the Church of Scientology. The introduction purports to be a speech by the famous chief of the Soviet secret police, Lavrentiy Beria, to American students at the Lenin University about how to subvert societies through the imposition of psychopolitics on populations through the guise of mental healing. The entire text is fraudulent, and all indicators point directly to Hubbard as the author. In any case, Hubbard wrote about the brainwashing booklet to his followers, claiming that unless the basic philosophy of the brainwasher is understood, auditors will have difficulty handling clients who had suffered the techniques. More, he was trying to both discredit psychiatry and endear his organization to the American government with the claim that Dianetics and Scientology could reverse the effects of communist brainwashing and thus was a powerful political tool. That's the inversion. Certainly, Hubbard's desire to secure Dianetics and Scientology as a weapon against communism would explain why he wrote the FBI, you guys seeing the patterns, about the booklet in mid-December 1955. It also would explain why the Church of Scientology published the slim volume as a public service. Back cover of Hubbard, probable author, 1955. Obsessed with issues of controlling and subduing people and nations, the Brainwashing Manual is an extraordinary work. Most probably key ideas that Hubbard, presumably, wrote about in the Brainwashing Manual became policies and procedures in the RPF nearly 20 years later. The manual's own definition of psychopolitics, for example, indicated that it was the art and science of asserting and maintaining dominion over the thoughts and loyalties of individuals, officers, bureaus, and masses. Like the last 5 years, but what do I know, you guys? And the effecting of the conquest of enemy nations through mental healing. Later, the test presented a strategy for subversives to use in destroying individuals' opposition to the state, and this strategy involved the destruction of any forms of individuality that might foster doubts against the imposing ideology. The tenets of rugged individualism, personal determinism, self-will, imagination, and personal creativeness are alike in the masses antipathetic to the good of the greater state. Brave New World. These willful and unaligned forces are no more than illnesses which will bring about disaffection, disunity, and at length the collapse of the group to which the individual is attached. Having identified individuality as a threat to the greater state, the solution was simple. It is the mission of psychopolitics first to align the obedience and goals of the group, and then maintain their alignment by the eradication of the effectiveness of the persons and personalities which might serve the group toward disaffection. Psychopolitics makes it impossible to remove that part of his personality, which by itself is making havoc with the person's own constitution, as well as with the group with which the person is connected. In essence, the state had to establish its own goals as the only acceptable ones, then destroy aspects of people's personalities that might lead them to individualistic expressions that would be out of alignment with those goals. This outline for totalitarian conformity transformed into the reality of the RPF. I just want to add real quick, you always hear them, the group comes first, the group comes first. That's the inversion. Because in normal society, family first. And they were willing participants, the adults. Hubbard's discussions of brainwashing in the late 1960s. During the late 1960s, Hubbard discussed brainwashing at least 4 times in various talks and writings. And these discussions always were consistent with the basic techniques of personality destruction and goals realignment discussed in the Brainwashing Manual of 1955. The book, All About Radiation, bridges the 1960s and the 1950s since Hubbard took his comments from a 1957 Congress on nuclear radiation and health, published then that same year, then reissued the book in 1967. This publication included a section entitled, What Brainwashing Is. Brainwashing is a very simple mechanism. One gets a person to agree that something might be a certain way, and then drives him by introverting him and through self-criticism to the possibility that it is that way. Only then does a man believe that the erroneous fact was a truth. Like the last 5 years. By gradient scale of hammering, pounding, and torture, brainwashers are able to make people believe that these people, i.e. the victims, saw and did things which they never did do. As he had indicated in 1955, people could be brainwashed, he believed, by giving them an external goal or fact, then breaking them down through stress until they believed it. Military, anyone? 2 years after the reissue of All About Radiation, on December 20th, 1969, Hubbard discussed brainwashing again, but added a twist. Now he defined it as the subjection of a person to systematic indoctrination or mental pressure with a view to getting him to change his views or to confess to a crime. Quoted on Hubbard, 1976, Bravo 55. Not only, therefore, did Hubbard believe that he knew how to force people to change their minds on vital issues, but also he thought that he could force presumably false confessions out of people by brainwashing them through severe stress Again, these insights bore fruit in the RPF environment, also the auditing. Additional glimpses into Hubbard's knowledge about brainwashing comes from a March 1969 Scientology article in the organization's Freedom newspaper. Another inversion, by the way. At the time of initial publication, the article entitled Brainwashing did not reveal its author, and only after 1992 were researchers able to verify that it came from Hubbard himself. See Church of Scientology International, 1992. The article contained a long excerpt from a politically conservative writer, Robert G. Ridgway, followed at the end by Hubbard's comments. And one section of Ridgway's commentary contained a section subtitled Nervous Breakdown. It described techniques designed to break down individuals and then build them up into externally defined goals of the group, just like the military. Sound like Lisa Mills? Does this sound like Lisa McPherson? And numerous others? Like Philip Gale that jumped off a building? The first part in the technique of brainwashing is an artificially induced nervous breakdown, which breaks the line with the individual's past experience and casts him adrift in a sea of suggestibility. This is brought on by exhaustion, confusion, continuous physical pain, and fear and anxiety. This destroys human individuality and identity by fracturing fixed habit patterns and employing the useful fragments, cemented by suggestion, to rebuild an entirely different personality. Memory is diffused, logic is confused, and judgment is distorted in the absence of reference and discipline. The person has lost control of his mind. It is then that suggestion is most effective. The victim is grateful to be oriented again. He appreciates any purpose or direction given to him. He feels he has been led back to sanity. This is our whole world, by the way. But in reality, his soul has been stolen. Black magic, anyone? This was done to American fathers in Korea and their sons in Vietnam. Similar to Hubbard's writing in the previous decade, this article identified the necessity of destroying individuality, accomplished here through inducing nervous breakdowns, otherwise known as psychosis, and then aligning the shattered personality with officially provided purpose and direction. Shattering people's minds, sometimes creating altars. Hubbard, we presume, had made a similar argument about breaking down people in the Brainwashing Manual of 1955. The manual stated that there is a curve of degradation which leads downward to a point where the endurance of an individual is almost at an end, and any sudden action toward him will place him in a state of shock. Similarly, a soldier held prisoner can be abused, denied, defamed, and degraded until the slightest motion on the part of his captors will cause him to flinch. Similarly, the slightest word on the part of his captors will cause him to obey. Just want to interject, like threatening people's jobs, but what do I know? Or vary his loyalties and beliefs. Given sufficient degradation, a prisoner can be caused to murder his fellow countrymen in the same stockade. Experiments on German prisoners have lately demonstrated that only after 70 days of filthy food, little sleep, and nearly untenable quarters, that the least motion toward the prisoner would bring about a state of shock beyond his endurance threshold, if he's still alive, and would cause him to hypnotically receive anything said to him. Thus, it is possible in an entire stockade of prisoners, to the number of thousands, to bring about a state of complete, servile obedience, and without the labor of personally addressing each one, to pervert their loyalties and implant in them adequate commands to ensure their future conduct, even when released to their own people. Again, Techniques involving attempted attitude changes through severe stress became reality in the RPF, which Hubbard created less than 5 years after publishing an article on brainwashing that contained Ridgway's comments about nervous breakdowns. Okay, I'm going to stop there. You guys, I'll probably return back to this later this evening. Have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day.